As a writer, your first year is the hardest, but if you're careful, it is possible to avoid some critical mistakes. So in this video, I'm going to talk about my top 10 lessons learned during my first year as an author. What's up, guys? Michael Laurent here with Author Level Up, helping you write world-class stories better and faster. And I create these videos because I believe that each of you has Stephen King level talent and you just need help unlocking it. So if you're new here, consider subscribing and click that little bell, ding, 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 to get notifications every single time I have a new writing video. And in this video, we're talking about my top 10 lessons learned during my first year as a writer. So I thought I would do this video as a follow-up to my video on my first lessons or hardest lessons learned from my first book. I thought that video was pretty popular, so I thought I would do this one. Now, to give you a little bit of context, the year was 2014. My wife was pregnant with our daughter. I just bought a new house, and I just started a new job in a new department at work, and things were very uncertain because I was completely starting over, and there was just a lot of things going on. I had lack of sleep, a lot of hormone things going on with the baby, and things were just very uncertain financially, personally, emotionally, professionally at work, and here I am publishing my first book. And I look back on that first year now, it's 2019 as I record this, and it's crazy how far I've come. But it really wasn't that long ago. And I suspect that a lot of you, if you're in your first year of publishing, things just don't seem certain. So I just want to talk about my top 10 lessons that I've learned, and maybe you'll learn something from it. All right, mistake number one was that I purchased a pre-made cover for my book. My first book was called How to Be Bad. I rebranded it. It's now known as Magic Souls. But I had no idea. I didn't know the first thing about cover design. As you will find out later in this video. I didn't know the first thing about it, and so I found the first pre-made that I could find. And there was nothing wrong with the pre-made. I'll throw it up here on the screen. Nothing wrong with this cover. I mean, it's not a bad cover. It just didn't do my book any service. And, you know, I paid $40 for this. I was on a shoestring, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world at the time. Because, you know, if you look at the character, you know, is the sun rising or is it setting on her face? And there are all these philosophical questions that the cover raised. Turns out that those aren't the types of questions you want your cover to convey. So I would not have done a pre-made cover first time around. Mistake number two is one I've talked about a lot on this channel, and that was registering a trademark. So my first novel, How to Be Bad, it was a choose-your-own-adventure type novel for adults. And so I thought this was going to be the hottest new thing, because every writer thinks their first book is going to be the hottest thing since sliced bread, or the newest thing since sliced bread. And so I registered a trademark. I paid an attorney to register a trademark for my brand Decision Select Novels, right? Because couldn't use the word choose your own adventure. So I decided to register a trademark for my own unique brand of this type of book. And it got approved by the United States Patent and Trademark Office. And yeah, I paid a lot of money to get that done, and it turns out it was very stupid because the trademark is really only valid here in the United States, and so I had to create two separate editions of my book. I had to upload a United States edition, and then I had to upload an international edition that didn't have any of the trademark protections on it. It was just complicated. It made things really difficult. And looking back on it, it was the dumbest decision that I made in 2014. I ended up pulling the trademark, and I no longer own it. And yeah, all that money that I spent on the trademark could have very easily been reinvested back into my business in another way. All right, mistake number three was trying to promote too early without any understanding of my audience or my niche. You know, in 2014, I guess they're still popular today, but in 2014, the email book list type places like Fussy Librarian and BookBub and Kindle Books and Tips and all those sorts of places where, you know, they've got mailing lists of readers and you just promote your book to those readers. Those were a lot more popular and a lot more prevalent than they are now. Today, it's questionable if they can really make you money anymore. But back then, I mean, that was one of the primary ways to make money. And so I thought, well, why don't I pay for as many ads as I can to promote my book, Festival of Shadows. I'll pay for as many ads as I possibly can during the first week of the book, and I will throw the book at as many readers as possible. And doesn't matter because I know I'm going to make all my money back, right? Realistic. So I think I spent like $200 on ads for a 3-day period. You know, it was super stressful getting everything coordinated, and I think I made like $40 back. It was a colossal disaster. The book really didn't do very well during the first year, and yeah, I definitely learned the importance of understanding that just because a mailing list has 20 or 30,000 people on it doesn't mean that those 20 to 30,000 people are in the target market of your book. I know it sounds silly at face value, but I really learned that lesson firsthand. Mistake number 4 was that I started a blog. Now that in and of itself wasn't a mistake. The blog was a smart thing to do because, well, that's how you build an audience. It's how you connect with people. But I just went about it the wrong way, right? So I read all the resources I could find about blogging back in 2014, but I was blogging without a voice. The posts I was doing didn't make any sense. Some of the stuff I was doing like writer stuff on my blog. And then I was promoting my fiction on my blog. I just had no idea who the target market of my blog was, right? And I think a lot of people have that problem, especially when you just write fiction, right? What do you actually write on your blog? And so I tried to sound like all the cool copywriters out there, and it just didn't do very well. And I pulled my blog about, I think maybe halfway through the year. And I said, "Oh, it wasn't successful because it just didn't work." Well, that wasn't true. It wasn't successful because I didn't know what I was doing. So yeah, if I could go back in time, I either would not have blogged or I would have been a little bit more intentional about the content that I was creating. Number 5 was doing translation too soon. So I had my book Festival of Shadows translated into, I think it was Spanish or Italian, during the first year, right? Now, this is the same book I just said a couple of tips ago that I threw a bunch of money in marketing at, and it didn't do very well. It didn't do very well as a translation either. I got pitched with the idea or pitched with the opportunity, and I thought, oh, wow, that means I'm going places, right, to get my book translated. And the translator was great. The translator did a good job. There was nothing against the translator, but because I didn't understand the target market of the book, and because there were some fundamental errors that I made in the creation of the book, I kind of cut myself off at the kneecaps in terms of a market for the book. And so if I could go back in time, I probably would have done translation a little bit later, and I might have done it, I would have waited to do it for a book that was selling a lot better so that I would have had better prospects. Okay, number 6 is the one you've probably been waiting for. This is number 6. Like, these are in no particular order, by the way. But number 6 is probably just, I look at it and I just, all right. So I had a book my first year. I talk about this book all the time on the channel. You know which book I'm talking about. So I wrote a book, and it was originally called Eaten, and it was about a group of terrorist vegetables trying to overthrow a evil empire of processed foods. All right. I can't say that without laughing even today. But if you read the book, it makes sense. Okay. So I published this book, and I thought, okay, this is going to be the coolest thing. Like, there's nothing else like this on the market. And yeah, so everything I did with this book was a masterclass of what not to do when you're publishing your first book. Okay. So first thing I did wrong was the cover, right? So I commissioned a cover designer. And this was he was a good cover designer. This is not at all an indictment of the cover designer, because the cover designer was good. He did the cover to my book Festival of Shadows, which not bad at all, right? So I commissioned him for this cover, and I was explaining to him what I wanted on the book cover, and I said, well, one of the main characters is a stalk of broccoli, and he's wearing a leather jacket, and he's got an earring in his left ear, and he uses knives, and oh, by the way, he's wearing jeans, and he's wearing red Chucks. And I guess I don't know. I would love to have like an omniscient view of like life. And I would love to see the look on my designer's face when he got that description of what I wanted on the cover. And then not to mention, I gave him like 3 or 4 pages worth of things that the book was about. I mean, I gave him the too much information version of everything that happened in the book, and I just confused him utterly. He never told me that, but I know that I confused him because when he sent the cover back, it didn't really look like a book cover. You know, it looked like a character design, and there was just some words on the top of it that was like a book cover, right? The problem was that I micromanaged the design. I gave him no clarity in terms of what the book was about, what the genre was. I didn't know what the book's genre was, you know, and I gave him too much information. That's exactly what I should have expected to get. I got a work of art. He did an incredible job making this character look real, right? It's exactly, in many ways, exactly what I imagined Brock, the character that I was talking about, to look like, but it didn't look like a book cover. And so when I started marketing the book, people were just like, "What the hell is this?" You know, it's this man with this broccoli man on the cover. I didn't do my book any service. The book is really about the dangers of not eating healthy and the dangers of, you know, relying on food and eating food that is not good for you and not realizing it until it's too late, right? There was an important message in that book, and it got completely lost with all of the marketing, right? And the second thing I did wrong with this book, and again, it's not an indictment on this person because he did a phenomenal job, was I got the book into audio within, 2 or 3 months of getting it done. And the narrator did a good job, but I didn't understand what an audiobook should have sounded like. I had really only listened to maybe 2 or 3 audiobooks in my life up until this point. And so I put the book up on ACX and I thought, okay, this is going to be cool. I'm going to get my book into audio. And I got some pitches and he did a good job. But it wasn't what an audiobook probably should have sounded like, right? But I didn't know that. And I wasn't able to give him that direction. And so what happened is we ended up creating an inferior product, right? And so that's just a lesson, right? If you're going to get your book into audio, really understand what an audiobook should sound like. And if a narrator doesn't sound like what it should sound like, I don't know how else to say it, then it might be best to just wait and wait till you can afford getting your book into audio with a good narrator. Again, not that he was a bad narrator. It's just it was one of the first books I think that he did in his career, and you could definitely hear it. And the book itself, I think that I wrote, it had some fundamental errors as well. And so, like I said, just like I did with the translation, I kind of cut my book off at the kneecaps. And so, if you look at everything that I did with Eaton, my series, I did everything wrong with that series. There wasn't a single thing I did right with that series other than I was able to realize a vision that I had artistically, I think fairly well. But again, that would be the number one probably mistake that I made in 2014 during my first year. All right, number 7, this is a quick one. I did a lot of local book events. I live here in Des Moines, and there's a number of opportunities that you have to get in front of readers at book fairs and book sales and book readings and book signings and things like that. And they were just dead ends. They didn't go anywhere. There were a lot of authors at these events, and very few of them sold any books. And it was a waste of time for me because I had to drive to get there. I also had to order and spend the money to order physical paperbacks to sell, and I didn't sell anything. And then you've also got to figure out how to take cash and credit cards, and there's just a lot of things that I had to do, and a lot of time and effort that I had to incur for a very, very little return. It was pretty cool to meet a lot of the authors in the area. That was probably the best part about it. But other than that, it was not anything that made me any significant amount of money. And it is something I no longer do because my time is better spent doing other things. All right, number 8 is that I didn't do paperbacks right away. So I was one of those authors that would publish a book on Amazon and then the paperback would come several months later, mainly because I didn't know how to format paperbacks properly. And then also, when I started formatting them, it took me forever because I had so many issues, and Microsoft Word would not cooperate. So, it's one of those things. If you're going to publish a book, I would publish the ebook and the paperback at the same time, if not within a few days of each other, because you're just losing out on sales opportunities, right? And when people come to your book page and all they see is an ebook edition, that just puts you at a disadvantage, particularly if you write nonfiction. But yeah, just try to do both editions at the same time. Don't do what I did. And another issue. This is kind of like a little mini issue on this. Is I didn't create good paperbacks. I didn't know what good paperbacks look like. They just looked amateur. They looked terrible when I got them physically, and that's one of the reasons I no longer use Microsoft Word to format my paperbacks. I switched to Vellum, and that was probably the best $300 I ever spent in my career because I was able to go back through my entire catalog and get everything into paperback finally. All right, number 9 was one that it took me several years to recover from, and that was a lack of focus. So during my first year, I published a lot of books, and I published a lot of different books. So I published a Choose Your Own Adventure for adults, two of those, right? One of them was like an urban fantasy-ish type book. Another one was like a fantasy adventure. I published my Eaton series, which is now known as Moderation Online, which is more of like it's like a game lit. It takes place in a video game. I published a poetry collection. I published a nonfiction book for writers. I just published a lot of different things, and I put them all under the Michael Laurent name. Now, today, if you look at my catalog and you look at the things that I'm publishing, I still have a lot of different genres. That's something I started in 2014, something I still continue to do to this day. But I think if you look back at my old books, there was just a distinct lack of focus. Today, if you go to my website, if you go to michaellaurent.com, you will see things pretty clearly pulled out. So it's very clear where you're looking at my fantasy books. It's very clear if you're looking at my science fiction books. And then I pulled my nonfiction books under a pen name, right? And those are over on authorlevelup.com. And so I think I've done a better job now of creating distinctions and giving readers a clear choice, right? So if you write science fiction and you stumble upon my book page, you know immediately where the science fiction books are, right? I just didn't do that then. And it also didn't help that I didn't have any branding on my books. I think that also didn't help. Every cover design I did was distinctly different, right? So you didn't know what a Michael Laurent book should be, right? And so I had to learn that the hard way because I had to spend a lot of money over the next few years rebranding my series into or all of my series into something more cohesive and making sure that everything looked a little bit different, right? So just make sure just be intentional and thoughtful about what message you're giving to your readers about what types of books you write. If you happen to be a genre hopper like I am, then you just have to work a little bit harder at making sure your branding is legit. All right, number 10. It's not really a mistake. It's just kind of like a rookie thing, right? So when I started my YouTube channel and when I started podcasting, oh, I can't wait to talk about the podcasting. All right, so when I started my YouTube channel, I bought like a cheap little microphone. It was like a little lapel mic and just terrible sound. I mean, just awful. Just terrible. Like lots of hissing and background noise, and it didn't make my voice sound very flattering. And I shot everything on my phone, which was fine. I mean, if that's all you got, that's all you got, right? Cell phone cameras really aren't that bad. But the audio was just really bad. And if I could go back in time for my early YouTube videos, I would have invested money in a better microphone because it just makes the experience better. Hence why I have the microphone here, right? So that was the first thing. And the second thing was I started podcasting in 2014 and didn't really know anything about podcasting. See a theme here? I just start things. I don't know about them and I learn about them as I go. That's one of my strengths. But yeah, when I started off doing a walking podcast. So I would This was a thing back in 2014 for like 3 months. A few friends and I, we would do walking podcasts. So it's actually a driving podcast. So I'd put my phone in my cup holder, and while I was driving to the gym, I would turn on the microphone and just talk about whatever was on my mind. And then I would upload it to SoundCloud, right? So it was called Driving with Michael. If I can find a picture, I'll throw it up here. I don't know if I still have it, but bad audio quality, right? It was bad. And I did another podcast during that time where I was using like I don't know, it was like those headphones that you have, and they have little microphones attached to them. That you use for your phone. I was using that for for my audio, and I learned real quick that just didn't sound good, right? And so I spent the money down the road to invest in better audio. But what does this mean for you, right? If you're just writing fiction, at some point you're going to be asked to speak publicly, right? That whether it be on someone's podcast, whether it be in public at a local event, if you choose to do that, at some point someone's going to want to talk to you about one of your books. And someone's going to want to feature you so that readers can see what you look like, right? And making sure that your audio and your visual presentation is professional is pretty important, and something that I underestimated. In fact, I'm going to find another video of my very first podcast interview, and just look at that. That looks horrible. Like I had the camera angle like all the way up here. It was like a psycho camera angle, and yeah, I mean, you make sure the camera's level to your face. I didn't understand that for several months. But yeah, so those are my top 10 mistakes as a first-time writer during my first year of 2014. And, I can never end these videos with just mistakes, right? There were 3 things that I did right during my first year of publishing. The first thing that I did right was also one of the things that I did the wrong way, right? And that was experimenting with a lot of different types of content. I said very early on that I wanted to figure out what it is that I wanted to write, and I would experiment and try new things. And my first year, looking at the books that I wrote, I think that was a good testament to my ability to be flexible and write a lot of different things and a lot of different topics. So the spirit of what I did was right. It was just the execution that I did wrong. The second thing that I did right was podcasting and video. Right. So what I didn't do them correctly when I started, but the spirit of what I did was right. And I wouldn't be here today doing this video for you if I hadn't at least been brave enough to take that first step. The third thing that I did right, and it's the only thing that I did right throughout this year. Everything else, I don't know that I did anything right, but this is the one thing I think I did right, was I learned how to cut my production time down. So my first novel took me 18 months to do. By the time I got to the end of 2014, a novel was taking me about 4 months, right? That's the pretty significant reduction in time. Now, if I wanted to, I could write a novel in 2 weeks, right? So learning how to master writing apps, learning how to figure out how to be more productive was one of the few things that I did right in 2014 that definitely set me up for success today. So I want to hear about your first year as an author. What were some of the things that you did wrong during your first year, and what were some of the things that you did right? Let's have some fun, and let's have some laughs, and learn from each other in the comments. So with that, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll talk to you in the next video.
Perfect.